participants, all those who are watching us, who are listening to us. So we are live. And once again, good afternoon to all those listening to us. You're present at the event How Were Reconstruction Funds Spent. I'm Maziarchuk, Deputy Director of the Center of Economic Strategy, and today I'm going to be the moderator of our meeting. This event is conducted within the Recovery Spending Watchdog project funded by the European Union, and the project is implemented by the Center of Economic Strategy, IER, and the NGO Technologies of Progress that is responsible for our portal, Big Recovery Portal. All the participants of the project are the RISE coalition members and civil society of Ukraine.
I suggest you switch the English translation, simultaneous translation in the bottom panel in Zoom. Ну, а для решти залишайтеся з нами на
And for the other
каналі,
participants, please stay in the Ukrainian channel.
та в чаті ваші
You can leave your questions in our chat or in the Q&A section, leave your comments and reflections there, and let us start. So today, besides our presentation of the results of the presentation to be delivered by Volodymyr Landa and Alexandra Batli, we've also invited three great speakers to participate in the discussion. This is Denis Uliutin, First Deputy of the Ministry of Minister of Finance, Vasyl Nevidomyi, Acting Secretary of the Accounting Chamber and the Head of Staff, and Viktor Maziarchuk, Head of the Center for Studying Fiscal Policy. So these are the guests we're going to have, and the welcoming speech will be delivered by Henrik Wittfeldt. He's the head of the Department of State Finance, Business Support and Social Policy of the EU delegation in Ukraine. Henrik, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good afternoon, colleagues and friends online. So just some short words from me in the start of this event. So we are going through very challenging time and just end, it seems, even if we had nice weather outside, which is good. So I just wanted them to reiterate that the EU is, of course, continuing to support to mitigate the consequences of the ongoing military aggression of Russia against Ukraine. And the major factor in that context is to support reconstruction of destroyed and damaged housing, administrative buildings, water, power supply, healthcare facilities, and school, and many other issues. And also then, in addition to this, just to support modernization of the reform process, including many different areas, including energy, including the green transition and digital transformation and other things. So in the close dialogue with the Ukrainian government, we are supporting the efforts to establish a more efficient governance architecture for long-term recovery and investments, and this would include the establishing of financing scheme and a monitoring mechanism. So the main, as you know, the main financial mechanisms for EU support to Ukraine is the Ukraine facility. So we are financing the state budget through significant budget support through the implementation of the Ukraine plan. We're stimulating investments and providing technical assistance for the EU accession and for the implementation of key reforms in the Ukraine plans, including the support to civil society, as the Recovery Watchdog is one example of. In this context, the public investment management reform is a key factor for the recovery and reconstruction process. So, and we welcome the progress made in the recent year in the development of a methodology for public investment management, and we also now look forward to the implementation, including the strong role of local governments in this implementation process, because without them it will be very difficult. And they also it's very important to strengthen capacity of local governments and civil society to be able to implement and monitor the broader public investment management agenda. In this context, we look forward to the continuous development of the DREAM platform as the main vehicle for transparency of investment, and also then the upgrading of the strategic and midterm investment planning methodology through the single project pipeline, which will be used as the main vehicle to identify investment projects that will be funded from the Ukraine facility. So in this overall context, I would like to stress and further underline the role and involvement of the civil society, because it's a crucial element to have an effective monitoring mechanism to ensure transparency, accountability, and sound financial management at all stages of the recovery process. So without that, it will be very difficult to move ahead. So I'm very happy to have this ongoing cooperation with the Recovery Watchdog and our partners there. So looking forward for a good event, and thank you for the support.
Thank you very much, Henrik. Дуже дякую вам, пане Генріку.
Thank you, Henrik.
І переходимо до нашої
And let us go over to our traditional part, which is the presentation of the monitoring results and reconstruction. And our topic is rather special today because our colleagues have been considering the results for 2024. We have already got the budget data, the amount of money spent on different things, and that is the data that has been in the focus of attention of my colleagues who will deliver the presentation. So let me invite for the presentation of the regular Recovery Spending Watchdog report, let me invite Volodymyr Landa, Senior Economist of the Center of Economic Strategy, Alexandra Betli, Senior Research Fellow at IER. And I will probably start with Alexandra because she will cover the most overarching topic. She will speak about the budget, the recovery budget of 2024. No, but Volodymyr is supposed to be number one. He's supposed to be the first speaker. I'm sorry for that. Okay, so let's change our paradigm. Please, Volodymyr, the floor is yours. Thank you, colleagues. I hope you can see my presentation. If yes, just give me a sign, and we'll probably start with RDNA 4, which is the first revision of the report on the recovery needs of Ukraine. This is rapid assessment, which reflects the results of assessment made by the World Bank and the government of Ukraine and the EU together. And this is the evaluation of the whole period from the 24th of February 2022. You can see that the amount of direct losses has increased by 15%, while the assessment of the needs for recovery has increased by 8%. But now it amounts to $524 billion. And in the background of those large high figures, we can see the priority directions for reconstruction and recovery for 2025 amounting to $17 billion, including investment projects for $12 billion and non-investment programs for more than $5 billion. At the same time, the funding for the priority programs of this year has been provided only by 7 billion, while we lack a little bit more than 57% of the required amount. But I will still speak on that later. We do realize that every day of war increases the needs for recovery. However, the pace of this increase is going a little bit down, and that's why it's only plus 8% of increase in terms of recovery needs for this year. So what is the distribution of these indicators as compared to the previous report? You can see it on the slide, and the highest growth, plus 46%, is in the energy sector, almost 60 billion, while in other fields the growth, the increase is lower, and in some sectors we have even some reductions for a number of reasons, like reassessment, or there have been some cases where some of the costs have been included to the cross-sectoral costs, and some of the costs were already covered in the previous year. So I will speak in detail on this a little bit later, but the whole RDNA for report is rather substantial. You do not see any substantial changes as far as the regional breakdown is concerned, because 66% of direct losses go to 5 frontline regions, as well as the occupied Kyiv and Mykolaiv regions. Altogether make 10%, while 9 western regions regions have been affected the least, and they account only for a little bit more than 1% of direct losses, direct damages. This is the slide exactly as you could see it in the RDNA 4 report, just for you to see how many complicated and complex projects are there and what the criteria to their assessment could be. You can also see 17 billion of priority needs for this year. These are priority, the amount of money covered by priority programs, and you can see that there are also a number of other programs that could be our priority, but with no additional funding, and also some other programs that have got some funding but are not priority programs for now. So all in all, we have identified 787 projects in the single project pipeline, and we can see that there are several tens of programs beyond this pipeline, and all in all, it's almost $70 billion. If we have a look at the sectoral distribution, we can see that the highest needs for funding are in the housing reconstruction and energy reconstruction, and the best funded are the needs in transportation sector by 76%, while the sectors that are most in need of money have been funded only by 15 or 27%, respectively, for the housing and energy sector. And the overall budget for this year is about $10 billion. And just a couple of words on procurement, just briefly, because there are some figures that should be mentioned. We and not considering the procurement of January and February, we are considering well, because for them we have got some final figures, and 90% of procurement processes have been completed. I mean, the ones that were announced in winter, and all in all, this amounts to 7 billion hryvnias for February. In the graph, you can see that this is the highest amount ever. We understand that this is because we have the beginning of the year with some budget specificity, but the amount last year was twice higher. So we should take this into account, and this is not a typical reduction of the amount in February. And the electronic system was used for about 2,000 procurement procedures, just one out of six. And here I'm talking about January and February. You probably remember that this is our traditional scale, but we have transferred the scale from billions to millions because we don't have large amount procurement procedures. The main organizers of bidding processes are departments of reconstruction, regional development, capital repairs, as well as some energy infrastructure facilities. And the top winners are the companies that can perform the required works, as well as some works related to reconstruction. So here you can see the largest construction procurements of January and February. They are rather small in amounts, and to be included into top 7, you just need to have the procurement for $5 million, and only one of them is the direct one. When we're talking about the construction of a multi-apartment building in the town of Borodyanka, this is for almost 400 million hryvnias, and this is the only direct one where we had 5 bidders because the level of competition is rather low. 79% of electronic procurement processes are non-competitive, just with one bidder, and in that figure was
So if we take electronic system for all the procurement and some small ones for which electronic system is non-mandatory, then there are actually 96%. And we do hope that this building of the multi-story building will not be the only project. We'll see more example of competitive procurement in this particular type of recovery and reconstruction. And that's everything from me. Thank you very much, Volodymyr. And now I would like to give the floor to Alexandra.
Sasha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, we did not show all the slides. We also have some changes, slides about amendments to the legislation. And, well, we also want to show about centralized procurement organization of the recovery agency. So far, it is only the decision. And we also introduce some new standards for construction. And I'll talk more about this in the presentation. And I will talk about funding. If we are talking about 2024, well, here you see the general indicators of the state budget. So we are talking about civil budget, and it was actually funded by the international donors. So the priority is resilience, and well, there was not lots of money for funding for reconstruction and recovery. The main sources of funding were the International Financial Organization, the Reserve Fund, also the local budget, also Ukraine 24 funding. There were also private funds. And the key point, well, actually, it's difficult to give money from the state budget because, well, the budgets are allocated for different programs and in different directions. The most popular form for just funding recovery projects is subvention to the local budget. And when we start talking about the fact that 20% of guarantees in Ukraine facility should go to the local budget, well, the subvention is there and it is already an established mechanism. The discussion may be what the subvention should be given to, but the mechanism is an active one. Well, the most important programs were the subvention from the fund of liquidating the consequences of the full-scale invasion and some other types of subvention. For example, there were 7.5 billion given out, and also there were 3.1 billion hryvnias, as it was the planned in the budget. But again, what was given 1.4 billion hryvnias. So we see that it was spent less than it was predicted. Also, there are different programs funded by International Financial Organization, and we have Ukraine recovery programs and emergency loan program for Ukraine's recovery. All in all, according to the Ministry of Development, 640 projects have been funded. And if we take a deeper look, and we have the Foundation for Liquidation of Consequences of Aggression, then the funding was 24.6 billion hryvnias, and these were the money that remained from the previous year. And if we are talking about this year, so we have some forfeited Russian assets, but again, there are not of them. The actual expenditures were 17 billion hryvnias. These other data from the Ministry of Development and the Ministry of Finance. The key point is that 5.8 billion hryvnias were spent on the projects of local budgets, and these funds were given to the local budgets for the local authorities to complete the projects started in 2023. And some other funds were given according to the Cabinet of Ministers order. There were programs of the European Investment Bank and the World Bank, and they were in different areas related to reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine. If we are talking about actual expenditures, we see that for the Ministry of Development, for the State Agency of Recovery, and for general programs affiliated to the Ministry of Development, the funding was lower than planned, In particular, there was insufficient, very low funding of the very programs related to recovery and reconstruction. If we are talking about Ministry of Development, these are subventions. For example, certain programs started later, and therefore they were not funded in due time. So these are some problematic issues. Here in this slide, we see the key programs from the local budgets according to the order of the ministry. What is important for the recovery and reconstruction projects? This is the housing program. This is the compensation or reimbursement for the damaged or destroyed housing and certificates for buying flats. In March 2025, the program was launched on destroyed flats and houses, and the program is funded by the Bank Development of Europe, World Bank, and some others. What is important here? The request for this program is really popular, and housing, according to all the surveys, is key priority for the IDPs need, as well as people who lost their housing due to the Russian attacks. So when we are talking about funding of recovery and reconstruction of the previous year, there are a number of issues. First of all, it is practically impossible to allocate funding for reconstruction and recovery from the state and local budgets. This is really complicated. So it would be good if the Ministry of Development published the information at the website, particularly regarding the indicators for us to get this information. Again, the portal is not updated. According to IMF project, there is no information about funding of some projects. One of the components of our project is sub-grants to monitoring of recovery at the local level. And we see, first of all, the statistics of the Ministry of Development that, well, the certain facilities are put in operation very slowly. There may be different reasons for this, but there is no information about it. Again, there is no information about project implementation stages, and there is no information about delays in project implementation. Well, sometimes certain money is allocated at the end of the year, and there is no time to spend them. There are also some bureaucratic procedures related to the funding from international financial institutions, and also some local communities have low capacities, and they do not have enough time to prepare the documentation. Some of those problems can be addressed by the reform of our public investment management system, because it will be aimed at creating transparent and well-coordinated and efficient system of public investment. As a result, there will be good monitoring of those projects. The government has done a lot in this area regarding introducing and implementation of this reform. As far as I know, the local authorities have submitted 750 projects for the first call for public investment, and they amount to almost 2.3 trillion hryvnias. And we saw the proposals, and it is possible to judge the capacity of local authorities. Not all local authorities can submit everything in due time and in a proper way. And the Ministry of Finance has allocated 36 billion hryvnias for 92 programs, and they also identified some priority programs, and they have become part of our DNA 4 Volodya was talking about. At the end of February, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the decision on preparing investment projects. DREAM will become the program for managing public investments. And we understand this is only initial stage of the reform, and a lot of things have been done already. And we do hope that in the future the situation will improve.
Дякую, Олександро. Окремо дякую,
Thank you
що
very
ти
much,
залишила місце
Alexandra,
для нашого
and
шановного гостя Дениса
thank you very
Улютіна,
much for
першого заступника міністра
having
фінансів
some time
України,
for
для
Denis
того, щоб про
Uliutin,
цю
who is the
реформу
first deputy
розповісти. Я нагадаю те, що
Minister of
показав
Finance of
Володя
Ukraine, who
в
will
своїй
talk more about
презентації.
this reform.
За
As far as
оцінками
I
зараз
understand, what Volodymyr has
близько
shown in his
77
presentation,
мільярдів доларів
so
потрібно
about
на відновлення і
$77 billion
787
are
проєктів
needed for
знаходяться в
recovery,
Single
and
Project
there are
Pipeline.
lots
Отже,
of
Денисе,
projects
як ви
which are in single
збираєтеся
project
всю
pipeline.
цю
So Denis, could you
неймовірну
tell us
роботу
what you are going
систематизувати
to
і
do,
зробити
how you are going to
ефективнішою?
systematize this incredible amount of work, and how you are going to make it more effective? I will probably slightly correct what Alexandra has said. The point is that the low level of spending the resources in 2024 is not related to low level of funding. It is related to the low level of using these resources. So if we are talking about funding, we actually planned all the necessary resources to the needs mentioned by our colleagues. And the next step is actually using these resources. And this is the problematic point, the first global problem that actually should be addressed. And I'm really grateful for doing the research on funding the recovery and reconstruction processes in 2024 and evaluating the challenges faced by Ukraine under such difficult conditions, the full-scale invasion. And apart from full-scale invasion, the year 2024 has become really an important year regarding formation of the new approach to investment. And one of the achievements of 2024 is launch of the public investment management reform. So what has been done? Well, 2024 was not a pilot year, but a transit year for us. We approved our roadmap in 2023, and this roadmap describes that the transit model will be tested in 2024. And we stepped aside from the fragmented approach and focused on the unified systemic mechanism of selection and prioritization of public investment. And 92 priority projects have been selected for the funding from all the resources of the state budget. So we took into account the priority criteria and necessity to continue the projects that have already been started. This is just the beginning. What is ahead is implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the results. But the foundation is really solid. And again, your report has shown it as well. The year 2024 has become probably not the year of strategic funding, but a responsive funding. We were trying to respond to challenges in the area of energy, fortification, and housing restoration. That was necessary, but we have to go to the public investments focused on development. And therefore, we established the system of public investment management system as a tool of strategic planning, efficient use of resources, and actually ensuring tax payment. For us, it is really important as the Ministry of Finance. RDNA estimated huge level of destruction, but we have to use these limited resources in order to achieve maximum effect. So we have to do everything in a very rational way. And the strategic investment planning, and we understand it. Strategic investment planning is of key importance at the national level, but real restoration, and we all understand it, takes place at the local level. And therefore, on the one hand, we have to ensure that the local projects are well coordinated with the national priorities, and at the same time, There should be some flexibility for local authorities regarding identifying their most urgent needs that are related to their local development strategies. We also try to review the funding of the local projects. And the sectoral programs will establish certain criteria for the projects which are the most important for a certain sector. And when we are talking about the mandates of local authorities, for example, such as municipal infrastructure or some key services, the main role will be played by the National Fund of Regional Development. And we have updated some approaches regarding using the money of this fund. We also created certain frameworks in the budget code, and we have established certain procedures that have been approved by the government at the end of February. That's why this year the process will be better structured and more attention will be paid to planning and strategic landmarks. The first stage will be preparing a medium-term plan of priority public investments. This plan has to be approved in line with the budget declaration, and we hope it will happen in June 2025. Preparation of the plan is coordinated by our colleagues from the Ministry of Economy, and the document will include strategic investment priorities, considering the predicted amount of investments. Also, it will include the goals of investments and it will include energy efficiency, inclusivity, and some other criteria for further selection of programs and projects. The next step, approximately till the mid of July, will try to prepare sectoral portfolio and will try to update the unified portfolio of the state. So we expect that the updated and reviewed single project pipeline at the national level will consist mainly of those programs that will include specific projects. At the local level, the process will be launched in summer. Again, the plans of priority public investments will be prepared based on the predicted local budgets that are to be approved till September. The research states that the level of preparation in the regions is different. This is what we see during the transition period. And it was obvious, it was quite clear. That's why one of the priorities for the reform for 2025 is increasing capacities at all levels of administration. I'm talking about methodological support, training, usage of digital solutions, and some other measures. We think that without good preparation, we won't be able to achieve good results, while high-quality preparation requires lots of time and efforts, and we all understand this. And once again, considering the ambitious tasks set in order to implement a PIM system will require more support at all the levels of power. And I address you, Maria, I address our international partners. Expert and communication support is of utmost importance for this reform, because the reform is only at its initial stage, and there are lots of efforts to stop the reform. And, well, we have to do many things, starting from the strategy up to improving the skills of people, up to developing the methodological base. And when we plant this seed, it will be much easier for us to accompany and support the reform in the future. So our joint responsibility and our joint dedication to this reform, accountability and transparency should be the center of our joint efforts. Thank you very much for your attention.
Власне, цей вебінар, я думаю, що його вже
Thank
можна
you.
розглядати як
Thank you very
частину
much. I
комунікаційної
think
підтримки
this
цієї
webinar
реформи.
may already
Для мене
be
особисто
considered
реформа,
as
прям чесно скажу, вогонь.
support
Це
of this
прекрасно,
reform.
це
The
чудово, те, що
reform
воно
is really
відбудеться. Це
great.
дозволить дуже
It's good that the reform will take
якби
place
якісно
because
систематизувати
it
всі
will enable
зусилля з
us to
відбудови та
systematize all the
відновлення. Ми
efforts in
намагаємося
the area
моніторити те,
of
що відбувається
reconstruction and
зараз, і ми
recovery.
бачимо, що
We try
такої
to do
системності,
monitoring of
стратегічної
what is happening
спрямованості її
now,
дуже і дуже
and we
сильно не
see
вистачає.
that this
Тому
systematic
я би
approach is
сказала,
something that
адвокати
is
цієї
lacking.
реформи станом на зараз.
And
Але я думаю, що у нас
I
тут є
hope that
на вебінарі люди, які
we
відбудовою
have
відновленням
here people
цікавляться. Зокрема,
who
я
are
знаю, що у
interested
нас
in recovery
є
and
частина аудиторії
reconstruction.
якраз
I know
з
that some part
тої,
of
що
our
працює з відбудовою на
audience
місцях.
is involved
Справжнє
in recovery
відновлення
and
буде на
reconstruction
місцевому
at
рівні,
the
як Денис
local
правильно
level.
зазначив.
Denise has
Тому,
mentioned that the
колеги,
real
я прям
recovery
дуже
takes
вас
place at the local
прошу,
level. So,
наголошую,
dear colleagues, I
не знаю,
I encourage
Енкореджу,
you,
будь ласка, зараз свої питання, які у вас
please
є до Міністерства фінансів з приводу реформи
ask
ПІН,
your
з приводу
questions that
оцього
you have
впровадження
on
цих новел.
PIN
Будь ласка,
reform, on
задавайте в
those
Q&A,
novelties
задавайте в
to
чаті,
the
коли є
Ministry of
можливість це
Finance.
зробити. От
You may
напряму
use
Денис
it in
Улютіна
Q&A
спитати,
session.
що
You
ж
may write those
буде
questions in
Міністерство
the chat.
фінансів від вас
So
очікувати.
you may
Будь
actually
ласка,
ask
користуйтеся,
directly
чи є
what is
можливість
expected from you
користуйтеся
by the
цією
Ministry of
можливістю зараз.
Finance. So please
Поки
use this
до слова
opportunity
наступним
and ask
спікером.
questions.
Я хочу
And now
запросити
I would like to
Василя
give the floor
Невідомого.
to
Василь
Vasyl
з
Nevidomyi.
Рахункової палати. І Рахункова
He
палата – це,
represents
власне,
the
той орган,
Accounting Chamber of
який
Ukraine,
робить
and
аудити,
Accounting
перевірки
Chamber is
на
responsible
державному
for
рівні, а не на
inspections and
громадському,
audits
того, як
at
же
the national
відновлення
level.
та
And
відбудова
he will
відбувається.
speak again
Отже,
how
по
recovery and
3 роки у
reconstruction
нас
takes
відбудова там
place.
почалася
Well,
по маленьких кроках прямо з початку війни.
actually,
Василю,
recovery
які
and reconstruction
Рахункова
takes
палата
place from the very
проводила
beginning
аудит та
of the
аналіз?
war.
Чи ви можете,
So,
можливо,
what kind
розповісти
of
конкретні
analysis
приклади про
have you
слідчі
done? Or
об'єкти?
probably you can
Чи
give
можете
some
ви
specific
узагальнити
examples on
основні
certain
здобутки та
facilities,
сильні
or probably
сторони і
you can
основні
generalize the main
проблеми, які
accomplishments and the main
сталися в
challenges
сфері,
faced
на
by
вашу думку?
Ukraine
Дякую дуже.
in this area.
Доброго
Thank you.
здоров'я всім, дякую за надане слово.
Good
Хочу
afternoon.
сказати,
Thank you
що
for
за
giving me the
останні
floor.
два повоєнних роки Рахункова
For
палата вже
the
провела
recent
6
2
аудитів,
years, we
які
have
пов'язані
already
з
done 6
тематикою
audits
відновлення,
related
відшкодування
to
збитків, завданих
recovery and
збройною
reimbursement
агресією. Почали ми
of
з аудиту
losses caused by the
відповідності
Russian
виконання
aggression. We started
Міністерством
with
і
the
відомством
audit
таких повноважень, як створення
related
методологічної бази з
to
фіксації
such
оцінки
things as
збитків,
creating
відповідних
methodological
механізмів
database,
взаємодії, фіксації
again, different
випадків руйнувань,
mechanisms, how we
пошкоджень, збору,
fix the
обробки
damages
інформації.
and destruction
Потім
of
перейшли саме
facilities.
до аудиту
Later, we
процесів
started
розподілу
auditing the
фондів,
processes
коштів
of
фонду ліквідації наслідків
distribution and
збройної
allocation
агресії.
of funds
Конкретні
from
аудити
the
були
fund of
присвячені
liquidation of the
темі
consequences of
руйнування
full-scale
коштів
aggression.
гідроелектростанцій,
There
оцінки
were
масштабів наслідків
special
катастрофи
audits
і
related to
використання коштів,
Kakhovka
витрачених на
Dam
відновлення.
destruction
Ми
and
також
so on.
приділили увагу
We have
аналізу
also paid
поточного стану
attention
щодо
to the
оцінки
fact
соціально-економічних
how
втрат
it's
у сфері
possible
сільського
to
господарства.
evaluate losses in
Окремо
the area
стоїть
of
аудит
agriculture. There is also a
програми
special
доступні
audit
кредити 579.
on the
Це
program
безпрецедентне кредитування в умовах
579
військового
loan
часу.
program. This is
Там є і
unprecedented loan
позитивні
program
моменти,
under
і
conditions
є
of the
простір для
martial law.
вдосконалення.
There are
Про це ми
positive
про це
moments
дякую
there,
за
but there are
акцент.
also some
Зараз
areas of
ми
improvement.
також провели аудит
Now we
ефективності
also have
територіальної
done
громади у
the
війну
audit
на
of
темі
local
відновлення
communities'
соціальної і критичної
efficiency
інфраструктури.
during the war.
В поточному році ми
With
також
respect
плануємо
to
3
recovery
аудити по
of
темі
critical
відновлення,
infrastructure,
відшкодування
and we
збитків, а
plan
також
3 more
вже на
audits in this
наступний рік
area,
вже
and for
ідентифікували
the
ще
next
2
area we
теми. У
identified 2
поточному
more
році зараз ми
topics.
в процесі аудиту гуманітарне розмінування
This
земель
year we
сільськогосподарського
do the
призначення
audit
в
of
Україні
humanitarian
щодо
demining of
відновлення
agricultural
безпеки
lands
і
in Ukraine,
сільськогосподарського виробництва.
because we try to
Це також
focus
аудит
on
фінансової аудитності,
security
аудит
of
фінансової звітності
in the area of
спеціального
agriculture.
призначення
We
проект
also
Search, який сьогодні
do
згадувався
the audit of
в презентації
financial
Світового банку,
reports, and this
а
is the
також аудит
search project
діяльності
that has already
теж
been mentioned
згадувався в цій
today,
презентації
and
надзвичайно
also also we did the audit of the emergency loan program related to recovery and reconstruction of critical infrastructure. And for the next year, we also plan analysis of this area. For example, we shall do the audit of road facilities and audit in the area of settlements affected by the Russian aggression. Definitely, I won't be able to mention all the data about all these audits, but I will probably mention some of them. First of all, the audit related to the mandate and system of organization of the process of identifying losses from the war. It was done in 2023. There are lots of positive things, but according to our recommendation, the government has changed the procedure of notifying about destroyed or damaged property. Also, there was some work done on registered. We also did some work in the area of fraud prevention. We also just set certain requirements to the information that has to be submitted. We also worked on the order of the state register, identifying the requirements to its functioning. The register is in operation, and it's not only about housing infrastructure, but also about transportation, social and municipal one. And State Property Fund, according to our recommendations, has also updated some criteria for evaluators and mentioned some additional measures regarding their qualifications in relation to evaluating losses from the war. It is aimed at doing the evaluation according to the established rules. Then the fund of liquidation of the consequences of the Russian aggression. The subject of the audit was the money distribution process, and well, the allocation of money should be done in a transparent way and in line with certain priorities. And Denis Uliutin has already mentioned that there were resources allocated. The fund has had 62 billion hryvnias in 2023, and 5.3 billion hryvnias have not been used. 38 billion hryvnias, about 40%, was spent as debts, and there were certain experimental projects organized, including in relation to Kakhovka Dam. We have provided some recommendations on terminology unification, and unfortunately, there were cases which were not related to liquidation of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation. Allocation of money didn't include specific terms and specific decisions. And also there was no methodological support regarding prioritization of the projects. And there were some discretional mandates of the Intergovernmental Working Group. And it also influenced the transparency and objective approach to the selection of such projects. We have provided recommendations not only to the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, but also to the participants of the process, in particular to the Ministry of Infrastructure, to the fund in question, and to the Ministry of Development. They started implementing our recommendations, has taken a number of steps. There were some amendments to the legislation developed in order to improve the performance. And I would like to mention that still there are some problematic issues. And first of all, it's about responsibility of the participants of the budget process. Responsibility for implementation of certain projects and programs. The terminology is not well coordinated. We still do not have certain criteria for certain terms. And again, there is no clear list of the results. These recommendations so far have not been observed, and they are still topical, irrespective of the fact that the state budget for 2025 narrows the areas where the money can be allocated. The money can be used only for the compensation for the damaged or destroyed housing. Now about Kakhovka Dam, which was destroyed. Our recommendations were about the system of internal control and also about monitoring and meeting and monitoring whether the budget is in line with the adequate prices. It is aimed at preventing overcharging and inflated prices. Some recommendations have been followed, but still some recommendations are to be followed. So far, we are not satisfied with the way some of them are implemented. There were 16 recommendations on Kakhovka Dam, only 5 were done, and 3 are in the process, and 8 are still not there. And well, it's related to some master water pipelines. There are also certain remarks about the acceptance acts. Also, it's necessary to clearly identify the commissioners, and again, some other issues related to the contractors. To conclude, we did the audit of the efficiency of the program 579. This is the unique experience of Ukraine, and well, I don't know whether it will be useful for some other countries, but this is one of the indicators in Ukraine facility plan, and according to it, 30% of the Ukrainian enterprises terminated their activities or reduced their activities, and there were huge losses suffered. Therefore, with the help of our international partners, we obtained this program, and the state compensated some of the losses. The priority was given to agricultural enterprises, extracting enterprises, and so on. And the support was given to 37,000 enterprises, and some of them are micro enterprises.
Within 2 years, in general, we used about 37 billion hryvnias within this program. But it has been noted that there was some deficit in the funding, but it was implemented quite well, and the deficit was 7 million hryvnias, and by the end of 2024, we expected that would increase to 11 billion. The reason for that was absence of clear forecasting of the scope of state support in the background of high demand coming from businesses and the changes in the directions of support from the governments. We provided some recommendations, and that allowed to start comprehensive reconstruction of the IT infrastructure of the fund, through which the money was provided, and now they are installing the modern IT system that will provide good accounting system and reporting system. Transparency is ensured through the provision of an extended portfolio of credits and debts, and also there are some legislative changes for the limitation regarding the limitation proportion of the state support that can be provided to one company within 3 years. This is up to 200,000. So because of this limitation that has decreased, this has reduced the deficit of the program by about 3 billion, which means that our recommendations have some added value. And to conclude, let me also mention that we go on doing all this work, and this year we have conducted 3 audits. Next year we will have 2 audits as expected, but taking into account the things mentioned in the presentation today, we will also continue with our sectoral analysis in the field in order to identify and assess the risks, and then our recommendations will also be of added value and will really contribute to proper benefits for citizens. So we as citizens are welcoming a lot all those benefits for citizens, and I also think that any state institution is supposed to be working to give some benefits to citizens. So in our chat, you can now see the link to the account, to the report of the accounting chamber about Kakhovka. And I've also gone to the website of the accounting chamber. I've seen what reports were made public. Suppose there was a report on the budget. There was also a report on the procurement of drones and means for monitoring the state borders. So all in all, quite a number of interesting reports. And as far as I understand, sometimes the opinion of the accounting chamber may differ from the opinion of those people who deal with those expenditures and those processes. But anyway, it's really interesting, and it seems to me that analysis of the accounting chamber regarding reconstruction and recovery should be in public access, and it should be written in plain language for all citizens to be able to understand what is there in that report, because these are simply citizens who actually do the reconstruction. Sorry for interrupting. Um, mm, the point is that now we have switched to a new international audit standards methodology, and every fact is definitely evidence-based. Every fact we provide, we have the confirmation to prove all the facts. That's why all the data in the audit report has been confirmed and verified. We do have the evidence to support our findings. That's great. And I can also see that you work a lot with international bodies, international institutions, and that's very good that our accounting chamber starts building its institutional capacity. And now let me address our last speaker for today. That will be the last presentation or the last speech within this non-QAA part of our presentation. So I would ask the head of the Center for Fiscal Policy to take the floor. And I know that Viktor and his center have dealt with the local expenditure. They have scrutinized the situation in 2023. They saw who spent how much, why there were some underspendings, like we mentioned for 2024. So probably Viktor has all the answers to all the questions related to the year 2023 and maybe even regarding 2024. So Viktor, the floor is yours, and please could you tell more about the findings? Yes, colleagues, I hope you can hear me well enough. Yes, so I can hear you. Right, so let me share my screen with you. And let me tell you a couple of words on what we currently are doing, what we have done. And it's really true that we have already collected the data on the amounts of money spent from the liquidation fund and from special programs. We didn't take the security and defense sector or critical infrastructure, and we also excluded reconstruction and recovery. But we have all the public information for 2023 for all the other sectors, and we have already done the subvention for 2024. So I hope that the findings will be presented in public access in several months, and we will share with you the data that we collect, that we verify, and on the basis of which we create interactive infographics. So we take the data from the Treasury, verify the data for the data to be complete and correct, because quite often the Treasury gets this the Treasury is not publishing all the payment documents while we collect the data, verify the data, and show where the money went. And if we take, let's say, Kyiv region, just as an example, we may have a look at any facility that has been funded in a specific town or city, and we can see how much money was to be spent under the fund, under the plan. Suppose in Kyiv region, the amount was supposed to be more than 3 billion, but much less money was used. So we can have a look at every single facility to see what kind of facility it is, how much money was paid, who the payer was. You can use different filtering systems and to see the companies which you're interested in. And a couple of interesting points to confirm what Valery Denis said. He said that there was funding in place, but it was not always used in time. So here you can see our analytical report about the fund, and the highest spendings were made on the last day of the year. 1.5 billion hryvnias were paid on the last day of the month, on the 27th of December. And the same story could be seen in 2024. So you can see who got the largest amounts of money. You can see what the programs were and what facilities were covered. For example, in Kyiv region, we can see that the plan was to spend 14 billion for Kachinsky facility. In Hmyr it was 107, while only 30 were used. So you can have a picture of any a town, any inhabited settlement. Could be Bucha in Kyiv region, could be Kharkiv, Odessa, Dnipro. That's the data about the liquidation fund. But if we're talking about the local budget, there is a note here because that's not all the money, it's just in part of the money for 2023. Only out of those 6 programs which are directly linked to the regions that are, yes, programs that are directly linked to the war-affected regions. The ministry outlines those 6 programs separately, and now we may have a look and see what facilities were reconstructed within those programs and the facilities that are really related to the consequences of the war. Before that, it was a problem because we could not actually track it all down. We could not understand whether the reconstruction and recovery of a specific facility was related to the consequences of the war or not. But now it's easy to do that. Alexandra has already mentioned this problem today. We hope that in 2024, all the recovery from the local budgets would go through those 6 programs, which was not actually the case. And well, what is the share? I would say it's no more than 10%, 5 to 10% probably. Why are we mentioning such figures? Because specifically for Kyiv region, we analyzed the state budget, all the local budgets, and the international donors' money, and we saw that this is just a small share. If we're talking about local budgets for those 6 programs, so 4 million were used in 2023, and one third of the money was used for Donetsk region. What kind of facilities? Housing, education, and healthcare. Definitely. And again, we can see that quite a lot of money was paid in December. And this is all about management, administration problems. I hope that the reform that is being implemented by the Ministry of Finance together with other agencies will help to improve the situation. Well, the logic here is almost the same. If we have a look at the type of the facilities, we may have a look at each specific territory to see who got what amounts of money and for what. Besides this interactive dashboard, you can also be looking here for the companies which which performed the reconstruction works. We can select the company, see what kind of company it is and what it constructed. So to sum it all up, I would like to say that we provide access to our data, and our data is not just strict data. This is the data with the description. I will give you the link. You can use this data. We will be happy if you really use this data, and we will be happy to share new data with you. So it's easy. You just download the data set and you've got a well-structured information. Just take it and use it. And we will share this information not just with civil society, but with state authorities, and not only as regards the liquidation fund. We've also shared this information regarding specific credit programs which are now being audited, and here is our data set that we provided to experts for them to work with this data. As far as our expectations are concerned, I may say that in about 2 months, we will probably be able to present the fund of liquidation of the consequences of armed aggression for 2023 and present the trends. The trends that is as follows. The money is not used, and that is all about management issues, high quality management of investment projects. And well, in the nearest future, we will present the research on local budgets and the spendings of local authorities. But you have already got the data, and please, if you need some advice from us, feel free to address us, because we would really like to have this data used by you. So I hope I have squeezed this information into my 8 minutes. Yes, you're perfect with the timing. I think that actually your database is really so much important, so probably we should have allocated more time to you for your speech with your database. And I think that all our citizens interested in reconstruction and recovery will be happy to use this data. And I hope that the Ministry of Finance will also pay attention to this data sets. That is really great. We've got several questions because I'm gradually going over to the Q&A session. So we will have several questions from the chat and from the Q&A session. But my first question is for Denis Uliutin. This is the question on my part and on the part of those who also share the same level of interest. So Denis, could you please explain very simply for local authorities, could you please tell how unified project portfolios will be shaped up for local government? What is going to change? And what should local projects do to be included into the single project pipeline? Thank you.
Да, дякую. Ну, перш за все, хочу сказати, що виходячи з
First of all, let me tell you that judging by our model, at the local level, there should also be created some regional investment councils. And it will be them who will determine through their decision what level of investment they need at the local level and who should be present in those councils. But anyway, people who can make assessment in the respective sectors should be included to those regional councils. And if we're talking not about regional aspects, but local aspects and this project portfolio of a community, local community, I would say that primarily they need the strategy for local development or the community development, because anyway, the community needs to understand what they want to achieve. And on the basis of that, there should also be developed the investment plan for the community that would actually reflect the steps that they are supposed to take in order to implement their strategy from the point of view of investment. And here is the trick. Their investment plans, their investment strategies should include and take into account sectoral strategies and sectoral development priorities to be a success and to be included into the single project pipeline at the state, at the national level. If we speak about own mandate, what I've already mentioned, that should also be reflected in the regional project portfolio. Well, I meant actually not the regional, but the local project portfolio of a territorial community. The things that will be funded from the local budget should also be there, and the things that will be funded from other sources should also be indicated in those local plans. And the plans, please bear it in mind, should also correspond with the territorial development strategies. Thank you, Dennis. And who at the national level is going to take a decision whether this project really confirms well with the national overarching objectives and deserves being included into the single project pipeline? Is there any person, any position to like put a stamp that yes, approved? Well, it's all very simple. First of all, this project of a territorial community should get into the sectoral project pipeline. And then it is the sectoral ministry that will pass a decision as to whether a certain facility, a certain plan corresponds to the sectoral strategy. And then the decision will be passed to include a project into the single project pipeline on the basis of those sectoral pipelines. And for this, we already have the task force at the level of the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Recovery, and the Ministry of Finance. They work on that jointly. And after that, the proposals that have been prepared by this task force will be considered by the Strategic Investment Council, which is to approve the final decision on what is included into the single project portfolio, the single project pipeline. Oh, I think your information is exhaustive, but suppose there are any other questions related to this issue, just send them to our email, because this reform is really important, and we will try to answer your questions within our monitoring project, Recovery and Reconstruction monitoring project. I'm really grateful to all those who have put their questions in the Q&A session. So here is a question in English. I think, Dennis, this is the question for you. Yes, I've already had a look at this question, but let me translate it for those who will be listening to our webinar without reading the Q&A session, because we won't have this question in live broadcast. So it's all about the current status of the sectoral methodological recommendations that are supposed to be approved and developed by the ministries, and the status of recommendations on the preparation of programs and projects that are supposed to be provided to the intergovernmental agency dealing with the preparation of projects. So this is question number one. Please, Dennis, you're welcome. Yes, thank you. So, out of the methodological recommendations that really affect the participants of the process, I have to mention the recommendations that are to be elaborated by the Ministry of Economy. And according to our plan of activities, they were supposed to be developed by the beginning of or by the end of March, but because of the circumstances, it was not possible to have it done by that deadline. That's why the Ministry of Economy, as I hope, will finally manage to do their part of the job and they are supposed to elaborate those methodologies by the end of April, and the methodological recommendations will definitely be published, I hope, at the end of April, at the beginning of May. Thank you. So well, that is good news. And here is another question from the Q&A, where we can get the analytical data in the breakdown of regions. I think you can do it through our chat, because there have been several links put based on the speech delivered by Viktor. So I think that your speech has really been very interesting for all our participants. And now let me go over to the questions that we received at registration. I don't know whether it's the question for Denis or for Alexander. What is the correlation between the recovery costs of Ukraine of 2024 with the recovery plan for Ukraine that was published on recovery.go.ua? So can you tell anything on that point? Well, we will probably start, and if we speak about the national Lugano plan, recovery plan, it was never approved. That was quite a lot of work done, and we prepared, we presented some projects, but if you remember, that plan was based on the assumption that in 2025 we will have peace. There is no peace as yet, so I would not speak about any correlation for the time being. Definitely some reforms mentioned in the plan are being implemented. A lot of things are taking place, a lot of projects are being implemented, but nobody actually expected that in 2024, when we were developing that draft plan, we never thought that the energy reconstruction and recovery and construction of fortifications would be our priority. So I think that this exercise of delivering the National Action Plan was a very good exercise, but it was just an exercise because the assumptions did not come true. Yes, that's true. And there is another question we received at registration, because I'm also interested in it. It's probably not that much related to the topic of our today's discussion, but it's all about the future, and it's really a very important question. So, what is the plan for funding reconstruction and recovery by our international partners in 2025 and further on? Does the Ministry of Finance have any vision regarding how much money would be directed on reconstruction and recovery in 2025, 2026? Well, if we are talking about approaches of our international partners, I should say that the funding will be provided based on the model suggested by the Ministry of Finance, based on the PIM frame, and those projects will follow this methodology. All right, thank you. And the last question, again, from the registration point, and I will try to specify the question a little bit. So, the question is about the spending of money on people with disabilities, but I would also engage here the issue of barrier-free environment, and probably this is the question for Alexandra, because she knows better what the situation with barrier-free environment is locally. Well, thank you. As far as our programs within IPU are concerned, so we have expanded the funding for the prosthetics program, and this is something that is also related to people with disabilities and our veterans. And here the Ministry of Social Policy, together with all the government, have done a huge job, because we have stopped using our municipal companies for procurement of prosthetic devices, and we have switched to procurement of high quality prosthetics from the private sector. This is, it seems to me, more than 50 actors in the market, and the maximum amount, the maximum cost of prosthetic devices has been increased, which means that these could be advanced prosthetic devices. Well, barrier-free environment is in the focus of our attention, but it seems to me that when we are talking about the barrier-free environment, it's important for us to talk to local authorities because it's a local problem. And sometimes we have field trips and do monitoring of reconstruction and recovery, and quite often we see that there is no barrier-free environment. There are no walking ramps, there is no dressing room, there are no comfortable corridors for people in wheelchairs for them to be able to use the services. Why is it so much important to speak about barrier-free environment? Because the number of people with disabilities has increased a lot. These are our veterans and also civilians. These people with disabilities may well be parents, which means that they need to go to schools to take care of their children. That's why they need working ramps in schools. They can also work in kindergartens or schools. And quite often we are talking about inclusivity, engagement of veterans as workforce. But if we don't have inclusive environment around them, these people will not be able to work. And the same refers to hospitals, outpatient hospitals. But we as citizens need to raise this issue. And this is more a problem of local authorities, which normally do not raise this issue, which is really important. So that's what I wanted to say about the barrier-free environment. I can see that we lack some representatives of local authorities in our today's discussion for them to share their experience and their vision. So let's take the next two questions and we'll probably wind up. And suppose anyone has any questions that he or she considers to be important, so put the questions in Q&A. So the question from Alexandra Varmash. I'm not quite sure I've got the question, but the question is whether it's possible to predetermine the scope of assistance provided in rural areas and urban areas. Maybe it's about the breakdown of costs as far as reconstruction of rural and urban areas is concerned. I don't know, maybe that's a question for you.
Це запитання з зірочкою. Я спробую його
Well, this
прокоментувати.
is a
Якщо
bit
ми
a
говоримо,
complicated
чи
question.
можливо ідентифікувати, скільки
If we
коштів
say
з
whether it's
державного
possible to
бюджету виділили
identify
там на міста,
how much
селища
money from the
і
state
інші
budget will go to the
населені пункти,
towns,
можливо.
villages,
Це
and
не
some
складно.
other settlements,
Чи
well,
можливо
that's possible.
ідентифікувати, скільки
Is it
коштів
possible to
пішло
identify
від
what
наших
amount of
міжнародних
money
партнерів через бюджети різних рівнів на
went
ті
from
самі
our
міста,
international
селища?
partners
Можливо.
through the
Чи
budgets
можливо
to the same towns and
ідентифікувати,
villages?
скільки
Yes, that's
коштів на
possible.
відновлення
Is it
з
possible to
місцевих бюджетів
identify
пішли
how
в
much money
міста,
from the local
селища і тому
budgets
подібне? Треба
went
дуже багато
to the
часу,
towns and
треба багато
villages and so
людей і
on?
грошей. Тому
It's
що основна
necessary to have
ключова
lots of
проблема
human
тут
resources and lots of
ти не
financial
можеш
resources.
на всі
Because the
100%
key problem
стверджувати,
here is that
що
you cannot be sure
відновлення школи
100%
з
that
основної
restoration or
програми місцевого
renovation of
бюджету,
school
та
from
яка
the key
здійснилася,
program of
вона
local
пов'язана з
budget,
війною.
well,
І
is
є
related
наслідком.
to the war and
Коли
it
ми кажемо,
happened
що
because of the war.
все відновлення,
And
всі
when we
капітальні
say
будівництва,
that
це є військові,
all
це некоректно.
reconstructional capital repairs
Тому
is
дуже
related to the war,
теоретично можу
that's
сказати,
probably
що
not
так,
true.
на прикладі
So
Київської області,
theoretically, I may say yes,
цей
on the basis of
шлях
the
пройшли,
example
це
of
дуже
Kyiv region.
складно,
We
дуже
have
багато часу, енергії
we
і
have
ресурсів, тому
just
що ти
went
не
through this
можеш
way and we've
виділити,
spent
які
lots of energy and
об'єкти
resources because you
фінансувалися
cannot
як
actually
наслідок війни,
identify
а
what
ту
particular
інформацію, яку дає
objects
тобі на
have
твій
been
запит
reconstructed
орган місцевого
because of the war.
самоврядування,
And
вона
the information
часто
provided
буває
by local
неповною, тому що
authorities
ми
is often incomplete
знаходили в платіжках
because, well, in
більше
the payment
об'єктів, де
documents,
призначення
we
були
saw
платежі
more
зруйновані
objects, one that was indicated, for example, damaged or ruined or destroyed. Sorry for taking this question for a long time, but it's actually a complicated question. From separate programs, no issues. From the international partners funds, no problems. But from the local budgets, well, that's problematic. And here is the proposal to Denise. Probably the taxes should be transferred from the main programs to specialized ones. And it's complicated, but I think on the basis of 2024, they are still there. Mr. Uliutin?
Да, дуже дякую. Я
Thank you.
затрону кілька
I'll
питань,
try
відповідей, щоб
to
вони не лишились. По реєстру
cover
ІНФО,
several
що було сказано на
questions.
самому початку,
Regarding the register
реєстр був
mentioned at the beginning,
ціленаправлено,
the
оскільки
register
є
was
частини
closed on
об'єктів
purpose
критичної
because
інфраструктури,
there are
які
some
відновлюються
facilities
за
of
своїм
critical
коштом.
infrastructure that are actually
Далі,
restored
що
from
стосується
the International
безбар'єрності,
Financial Organization money.
це
Regarding
наскрізна ціль.
inclusivity and
Вона має
accessibility,
бути
this is
у
the
всіх
cross-sectoral
інвестиційних
goal, and it
проєктах
should be present in all
як
investment
саме
projects
наскрізна ціль.
as the
Ви не можете
cross-sectoral
будувати
goal.
якісь
You
об'єкти
cannot build
без
any
урахування того, що
facilities,
має
any
бути цей об'єкт інклюзивним.
objects without
Будь-який
making
об'єкт
it
інвестування.
inclusive and
І це якраз
accessible.
переход до
And
наступного, те,
again,
що
now I get
пан Віктор
to the
казав,
next issue
немає
that was
нам,
mentioned
як
by
країни,
Viktor.
необхідності виділяти для цілей саме інвестування об'єкти, які зруйновані, пошкоджені і відновлюються або реконструюються, або інвестуються в
clearly state what particular objects are reconstructed or renovated because of the war. For example, if the community has a strategic goal in relation to a certain object or facility, we should not relate it exclusively to the war. And, well, it's really difficult to sometimes make this relationship between the ruinage and the war. For example, you would like to expand, for example, the school because you have lots of IDPs in your area. Is it related to the results of the large-scale aggression and invasion? Well, this is really complicated point from the viewpoint of tasks that to be implemented. So our model is the investment model. If among the strategic goals we do have issues related to the development of the community, in any case, we emphasize the point that the investment should be aimed at development of the community. Well, investment for development is a very good statement and definitely well supported. I think that we do not have any questions in our chat and in Q&A session. So that was the last question. And now I have a question to Vasyl, and this will be the last one for today. And we need it for Instagram and TikTok. Did the accounting chamber find any case of fraud in the audits that you have conducted as of today?
У нас по всіх матеріалах, де ми бачимо ознаки
in all the materials where we see some signs of fraud or abuse or inflated prices, so all these materials are given to the law enforcement authorities. And yes, in some audits I have mentioned there are such materials. Can you mention the statistics? How many objects? Well, it's difficult to say, but it seems to me that for the previous year, up to 10. But again, I have to check it.
Річний звіт, буквально ми його готуємо перед випуском,
Yeah,
там
but
будуть зазначені всі ключові
we shall
показники, в
prepare
тому
the
числі
report, and
матеріали
the report will
передані
include
правоохоронним
all the
органам і
statistical
результати.
data, and it
Ну,
will
мені
also
подобається
include
ситуація,
the
коли з багатьох
materials
тисяч об'єктів
given
відновлення
to the
лише по
law
10
enforcement
змогли знайти,
authorities.
що щось
But that's
не
really
так і
nice that
неправильно. Це означає, що
among
Україна відбудовується,
10,000,
Україна відновлюється,
dozens
і
of thousands of
в
objects,
більшості це робиться
there were only 10
правильно і
cases where there were some elements of fraud, and that means that everything is done in a proper way and
Хоча
as it
це
should
не
be done.
пошук конкретного злодія, а
So our
попередження і оцінка
primary goal
ризиків
is not to
і
find a
запобігання
criminal,
таким
but to
порушенням.
do some prevention
І
work.
на цій прекрасній ноті хочу попрощатися з вами
And,
усіма. Дуже
well,
дякую, що
on
ви
this
нас
positive
слухали. Цей
note, I would
проект
like to
здійснюється за
say
підтримки
goodbye to all
Європейського
to you.
Союзу. Я
The
дякую
project is
нашим
supported
спікерам, що
by the
вони
European
змогли знайти
Union.
час і
Thank you,
приєдналися
dear
до нашої
speakers, for
дискусії. Читайте
joining our
аналітику і наші
discussion.
щомісячні
Please
моніторинги
read
на
our
порталі від
analytical
Recovery
materials
Portal і
and
на сайті
our
всіх наших
monitoring at
організацій.
our
Дякую
portal
всім,
and
що
at
ви
the
були
website of
присутніми.
our organizations. Thank you very much.